Most of the world's buildings are already built, and yet most conversations about smart buildings still sound like they're starting from scratch. We know the real decarbonisation challenges lie in Brownfield, the offices, hospitals, and campuses that have been running for decades. But upgrading the tech is only half the battle. The harder part is proving its value, getting those operational wins to reach the boardroom. My guest today, Peter Rake, has spent his career modernising legacy estates and helping owners translate performance into business outcomes. We talk about why visibility is still the missing link, how to build credibility with simple data, and what actually moves a project from pilot to portfolio. Let's get into it. Welcome to the Climate Gap Quick Cuts, a podcast for busy people building climate solutions. We spotlight founders, builders, operators, and investors doing the hard work behind real progress. I'm Ben, co-founder of Element 6. We connect climate tech companies with the people who make scale possible. Let's get into it. Peter, welcome to the show. Really great to have you. Could you give us an intro to you and the work that you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ben. It's great to catch up again. My intro, I guess my background is actually electrician by trade, come straight out of school into getting on the tools. I spent my time building switchboards. So really from day one, I did start in construction of commercial real estate. So I had a good time doing that. And I found myself in sales after I left the trade. I got into a company that was acquired by Schneider Electric. So my time up till then was with Schneider Electric in solution sales. So some of the things that I got to see working for a pretty big organization got me exposed into the buildings and connectivity in buildings. I actually then took a side path out into high-end home automation. So I did that, and I could argue that all day long that's more complicated than some of the technology that we see in commercial real estate.
Right.
Homes are very complicated with their integrations. Today, probably not so much, but back when we were doing it in the early 2000s, it certainly was. And then that's how I ended up with Switch. So we've been at this for 12, 13 years now. Deb, our CEO, and myself moved to the US to tackle that market in 2013. I found myself in Seattle, and I've found myself coming across over to Denver, but definitely was heavily involved in the early phases of those projects, getting them connected, commissioned, and the like.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for the color. So we're going to talk a bit about the Brownfield space, and you spend a lot of time in the trenches of Brownfield modernization. Why is that where the real decarbonisation challenge is?
I think it's because the statistics that we see, floating around is that, all of the buildings that exist today are going to be here in 2050. And I think that might have even been updated to 2075 now. So 80% of the real estate stock that we currently see and we pass in our day-to-day lives is already here. But I think we know, a lot of them are not connected. So there's I think in the US, there's about 6 million commercial real estate sites, and about 3 million of those are in and around 150,000 square feet. So that's the real Brownfield story, that 80% of the buildings here there's an addressable market there for that. So it's a huge opportunity. And organizations like Switch have been able to help those, clients like that have a smaller footprint, but many buildings, being able to save 20% plus on their, electricity savings.
I'm interested, when you walk into a 20-year-old building with all these different systems stitched together, what's the first thing that you look for to gauge if it's ready for a digital re-enablement?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. The big thing for us is the connectivity. Again, when we look at this opportunity here, and we look at how many buildings there are, obviously that we need connectivity. We're in 2025. We need data to be leaving these buildings and coming into platforms. And I think that's where we really get that stacked effect of many, many buildings and billions of kilowatt hours when we combine it together. So it's not super common in the smaller real estates to necessarily have that infrastructure, but that's what I'm seeking. You're seeking the connectivity. Is it secure connectivity? Obviously, again, cybersecurity is a big deal these days. And are the systems not proprietary? I mean, we are in 2025. I'd like to think that there's a lot of non-proprietary. Early 2000s, it was certainly common to have proprietary locked up systems, and the capital cost to upgrade them was prohibitive. But today, we're, pretty common to see that. So at Switch, we developed a tool and a feature in the platform called DX Cubed, and that's our digital device discovery tool. So low cost, can get onto, a network, get the discovery happening just to identify, because it's really, building owners and operators are challenged to really know what's connected in their buildings in this place. So our little DX Cube scan is identifying whether we've got BACnet, whether we've got Modbus. Have we got those open protocols? MQTT is very common today. And sitting on that network then gives us an opportunity to help for a pretty low cost. I'm not saying it's free, but a low cost can actually get a sense of what some of their good candidates in. You imagine a building owner with 100 sites. How do you get your arms around that without, completely, like, I appreciate you're going to have to do some truck rolls and spend some money, but you don't have to invest massive capital in getting that stood up and getting a sense of what is a good candidate to start this digital transformation.
All right, that's a good overview. So, you've now, if we think about the story, we've identified some of these buildings. Once you start upgrading, how do you then decide what to integrate, what to retire, and what to just leave alone?
Yeah, I think for me, I like to get my arms around all the data personally. I think you should leave no stone unturned, but I think the audience and this industry appreciate that the BMS is the headline of we talk about. The BMS data is the most readily available. I think there's no doubt in that. But I think where BMSs leave one thing behind is where the other aspects of, and even just context to data, because one of the things, particularly in our early days, I think BMS systems, and I'm not, beating them up too much. I mean, they're obviously an essential part in the business, but they weren't really designed to do any sort of, analysis. And again, this day and age, some of them do. But the BMS fundamentally was there to control the HVAC system. And so for me, when we were first starting out in this journey, delivering to a facilities operator that, oh, look, hey, we've connected to all of these HVAC sensors. We can tell you that these zones aren't meeting set point. Now, when we deliver that to a person who operates the building and knows the building really intimately, they'll say, oh, well, that floor's not occupied. That floor's, we're renovating that floor. Now, so, you lose credibility with those operators because you've just told them something that they probably already know. So getting context to that data is then our ability to go, okay, cool. Well, these 3 floors are not occupied. They're unleased now. They're vacant right now. It's not uncommon in buildings that we connect to these days to have a data center on a floor, right? So you've got cabinets spread through the floor. So if I tell someone that level 7, all the equipment on level 7 runs 24 hours a day, again, you like, well, yeah, that's the data center. So we've got to add context. So even without even integrating another system, we can simply add some metadata about these points so that our results have been, through consultation, but they're more credible to the operators. Then you multiply that by hundreds of sites. Now you've actually got some really, cool, insights. Then with the advent of IoT today, and again in 2025, IoT is fairly affordable. So I think that's why we've seen an uptick in actual tenants coming to Switch to ask for that, because they can buy wireless systems. But it's not always that easy to integrate everything into the BMS, right? Because sometimes it can be cost prohibitive. So adding simple things, particularly with the work from home culture now, adding some occupancy sensors in, because I've seen like many BMSs where the BMS schedule was set 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and it's set from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It runs Monday to Friday, maybe even a little bit Saturday. No one's there really checking it. But the building is very likely, and from our statistics, we know that Mondays and Fridays, occupancy rates are as low as 20%. So why are you cooling and heating the whole building? So those are the little insights. With small investment in some IoT, we can help you with that sort of crawl, walk, run strategy. Of course, the BMS is, statistically, again, the energy hog of the building, but it's about identifying how to optimize that and the spaces that the occupants occupy. So that's where we help people get up on those ledges, BMS, yep, and then in some investment in small IoT deployments, certainly then really get you those savings.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let's shift to visibility. So even when teams deliver great operational results, those successes rarely make it to the C-suite. In your opinion, why does that happen?
I think because it's hard, right? Because these guys and operators, particularly in the smaller real estate, cost constraints. Often now you've got sort of regional people that look after many buildings. Again, keeping Class A out of this, I think Class A are their own beast. Having 700,000 square feet, you've got a team on site. But if you've got 10, 200,000 square foot buildings or less, you're probably going to have regional people that look after those buildings. So trying to get that captured for the C-suite to report on, and the C-suite just really care about money, right? It's operations. So it's really challenging to go, okay, if I've had a tenant stop complaining about an issue, well, what's the dollar cost to the business there? Are they potentially now 1 foot out the door because we didn't resolve, the issue in a timely fashion? Tuning equipment, what does that cost? Could I avert truck rolls using a platform versus reactive fixes on sites?
Yeah.
So often, again, I empathize with the FM teams. Often, they are kind of using the Force, for a Star Wars analogy, to tune the BMS, right? They're using their own domain expertise. They know what the building's doing. They know on a daily basis. So they got the vibe of the building. But that's the thing, is that when they're doing that, how are they auditing whether there are changes to there just to, fend off a tenant complaint? Well, what's the impact to the business? Is that compromising the life of equipment? Is it ensuring that the operations is actually more costly now, potentially from a utility perspective? But not all that data is in one place. So, hey, we've fixed the tenant here, but what's then is there savings? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And then you can get some people that will look at utility bills and go, okay, then our bills have been reduced and our kWh consumption is down, but our utility costs have gone up. So our costs haven't been, but we have reduced kWh. But again, they're in disparate and often in siloed systems. So bringing this all together into a unified platform is like transformational to these businesses. And that's one of the things I've seen lately on the social sphere, is that, this single pane of glass or a dashboard is getting a bit of a beat up. And I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves with AI in that respect, because a lot of these organizations don't have the visibility as it is today to their entire fleet. And that's something I think where we definitely, and we use it probably a little too much, but it's very simple. It's crawl, walk, run, and that's it. Get your arms around, as we talked about earlier, in the order of magnitude, when you're talking about hundreds and thousands of buildings, the opportunity to save billions of kilowatt hours is very much on the table.
Yeah. So continuing your sympathetic ear and eyes to FM teams, what can they and ops teams generally do differently to translate comfort, energy, and maintenance into a language that the CFO or the C-suite understands?
Yeah, I mean, it's reporting. We advocate every day is for the business needs to invest in a platform that can grow with them. The platform needs to be agile enough to integrate those disparate systems. When you're talking about the investments in IoT, something that we notice in our experience is also budgets sit at buildings often, the actual real estate address. So it really needs, the business to be on board with all of that. We see a lot of fatigue in single point systems. So, metering on its own, or ESG on its own, or air quality on its own, again, they're just living in silos. And I think that's the thing that's taken some time in this space, is to break down. We're definitely seeing more and more of it, but that's where people can get a holistic view of their operations. If you're going to change something, you need more context into that data. So a lot of that is really what we're doing, so that the operations team can be more transparent to the rest of the business. Again, like you said, that empathetic ear is that the FM team don't have time to go and build a Power BI dashboard for the C-suite. You know, they don't have the time nor resources to do that. And then if you just email spreadsheets to the executives, I mean, that's, you know, that we definitely need to have, you know, something there that can report to the business. You know, they want to know, okay, well, how much space are we leasing next year? You know, why did we use 12% more on our, you know, sites here? And those sorts of things become clear when you've got and gone and invested in a platform that can build upon that for, you know, dare I say, future-proof the operational visibility to the business.
Right. I get it. So you would have had a number of successes over the years and worked with owners that have cracked that code.
Yes.
Can you share an example where a Brownfield upgrade did make it to the boardroom, and how did that then change how future projects were funded?
Yeah, it's honestly, again, just some of the things we've weaved through in the conversation so far is really starting off with the simplest data set is. So, you know, our real superstars are visionary sponsors. I often use this as where our clients, our successful clients, have a destination in mind. It might be a bit foggy off in the distance there, but it's a destination. It's we're taking this business and we're going to get it to here. And then they consult experts and subject matter teams and get their arms around it. So that's where the success starts. But it all starts with the most simplest of data. I mean, and that's the I think the thing for us here at Switch is that it's not very easy unless you've got a really, really prepared client who has gone through all of the IT and all of the rigmarole around cybersecurity to get connected and have data leave their assets. We often start with the utility bills. And that gives the whole business a good sense of, like, let's just say, give us 50 of your buildings, give us your utility bills. Are you using a baseline year, or we'll just baseline what their consumption was? Then we'll often work with them to create the benchmarks. And that's a simple turnaround of, you know, a week or so. And then we actually then can talk in business terms. Well, hey, here's my worst 5 sites. Those worst 5 sites, let's put some capital into those sites. And then we know from our statistics that we can save upwards of 20% on energy savings once you start to get connected assets, you start to get that really granular interval data into the platform. But it does start simply with just utility bills. It gives the business some really, you know, great intel, great insight for that. And we've got clients that have been on the platform for many years that are saving in excess of 20%. One of our clients has saved $18 million over the time with it. So when we talk about, you know, ROI, it's very much there over time. And that helps them then continually fund these programs. Even if they're net neutral, they're doing good for the environment. We're reducing our carbon. Like I said, sometimes the costs don't come down if the utility has kept increasing prices. But if you can demonstrate they've reduced kWh consumption, that translates into carbon savings. And that's the simple way. So yeah, you've got to definitely have that visionary sponsor on your side, have access to some of the real basic data, and then that takes it to the boardroom. The boardroom looks at that and goes, right, we're sponsoring that initiative. And it will never be, I'm not saying that they can miraculously find money, particularly when you're talking about hundreds of buildings. They not necessarily go, oh yeah, we've just found, you know, $50 million to do this. It's very much, no, let's do 5 or 10 sites. Let's then grow that to another tranche of 20. And yes, it takes time, it takes years, but you know, that's the way for us where we've seen the success.
All right. Well, as we're winding down in terms of my questions for you, my last one is, if you had to leave the listeners with one piece of advice for taking a building from functional to future ready, and you've given us some really good insight, but if there's one piece of advice you could leave them with, what would that be?
Start today. I do that on some of my LinkedIn posts. I just think people need to start today. It's like they say about investment and in retirement. Just start today. To me, it's get on board. Take stock of what people like you currently have. I appreciate that's not necessarily free, particularly if you outsource your facilities management to one of the big organizations of the CBREs and JLLs and so on. But at least, you can collaborate with them to take stock of what there is today, get together with the ops team, set some achievable milestones. Like just don't dive straight in. Oh, we need AI to just fix our operations. Well, it's not going to, because you haven't, spent the time the last 20 years corralling the data into one place. I think anyone that even touches AI knows that, we need analyzed data and so on, but just set those achievable goals with the teams, with the ops teams, and benchmark with utilities. I can't stress that enough. It's a simple method, but as I mentioned earlier, you really then need a platform to go, what's next? If the platform only does utility bills, well, you're still back at square one. You can't really now go, oh, wow, look, we optimized our schedules in this building and we've seen our costs come down, invest in some sub-metering. And then that's it, just really sort of rinse and repeat that. If it's 5 buildings in your budget, it's 10 buildings in your budget, depending on how big your portfolio is. But that's it. Start today, start small, and then just keep growing. And those savings from the first tranche fund the second tranche, and then so on. And it goes on and on and on.
I love that. I love that kind of just put your one foot forward and keep walking. I think that's really clear. As well as the rest of your insights, I feel like you've walked a really nice playbook for people. Even somebody like me could pick up and follow. So thank you so much for your time, Peter. I really enjoyed having the sharp insights from you during this session. So thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
What Peter made clear today is that getting from Brownfield to Boardroom isn't about reinventing the wheel. It's about proving the basics. So start with what you already have: utility bills, simple baselines, and the worst performing sites will tell you more than any speculative pilot. 2, add context so your data earns credibility. Occupancy, metadata, and operating knowledge stop false alarms and build trust. Make connectivity your foundation. If the data can't leave the building securely, nothing else scales. 4, break the silos. Metering, air quality, ESG, and IoT only matter when they're set in one transparent view the business can understand. And finally, remember, visibility drives funding. When you can show real savings, avoided costs, or carbon reductions in a way the CFO recognizes, the capital for the next tranche follows. Start today. Thanks for watching Quick Cuts. Short episodes, sharp insights, no filler. Catch you next time. You've been listening to the Climate Gap Quick Cuts. If you're building in climate tech, subscribe to hear more from the people making it happen.